A hotel room built inside a 9-decade-old grain elevator in Cape Town costs over $1,700 a night. A real converted grain silo you can book tonight in Tennessee costs $91, and they're both, technically, the same basic idea. A round metal or concrete tube that used to store grain, with a bed and a kitchen put inside it. All 5 of the places on this list are real, currently bookable stays. Not architectural case studies you read about and can't actually visit. Not private homes featured in a magazine spread with no way to book a night. Every one of these you can reserve right now if the dates line up. The prices on this list run from $91 to over $1,700, which raises the obvious question: what does a converted grain silo cost 18 times as much actually buy you? All 5 started life as the same basic piece of farm infrastructure: a tall, round, windowless container built to hold grain and keep moisture and pests out. Nothing else. None of them were ever meant to be lived in. That's what makes the comparison across this list interesting. The starting material is nearly identical every time, and the 5 results couldn't look more different. Here's the thing: every one of these 5 properties has to solve, no matter the budget. A silo is a circle. There are no corners inside a grain silo. No flat wall to push a couch against, no natural spot for a door frame, nowhere for plumbing and electrical to run in a straight line. Architects who work with these buildings compare designing the inside to playing a puzzle game, blindfolded. You don't get corners, so everything becomes an arc. Every owner on this list solved that same round room problem differently, from custom curved furniture on a shoestring budget to a multi-million-dollar solution involving hand-blown glass. Watch how the answer changes as the price goes up. One more honest note before we start. 3 of these 5 properties have no confirmed original construction year. What we could verify for those 3 is the conversion story: who moved the silo when it opened as a rental, not the exact date a farmer originally built it. We're not going to invent a year to make the story sound tidier, cheapest to most expensive. Here's number 1. Stay round rents for $91 a night, and it opened to its first guests on March 14, 2020. One of, by its own listings claim, only 2 grain silos available on Airbnb in the entire state of Tennessee. The silo itself has a real family history behind it. It originally belonged to Turner Bradford, who spent 35 years working at Rudy's farm and kept 2 grain silos of his own as a hobbyist farmer on the side. After Turner passed away, his son Jim Bradford, a cabinet maker and woodworker by trade, moved one of those 2 silos onto his own property on Beckwith Road and converted it into a place to stay. By his own account, building something round was the hardest project he'd taken on. Every wall, every shelf, every piece of trim had to be custom cut to follow the curve rather than pulled straight off a shelf at a hardware store. This is a tribute project as much as it is a rental. Inside, it's built for 2. 1 queen bed, a large couch, a full bathroom, and a kitchenette. A chocolate placed on the pillow every evening is the signature touch guests mention most. It carries a 4.96 out of 5 rating across 371 reviews. A genuinely well-loved little building, not just a novelty people book once and forget. Here's the honest catch, and part of it is about our own research rather than the property itself. We could only confirm this $91 rate through a single source. Every other property on this list we cross-checked against 2 independent platforms. This is the one exception, so treat that number as a starting point to verify yourself, not a locked-in figure. The other catch is about location. Mount Juliet is a Nashville suburb, roughly 20 minutes from downtown. A convenient overnight near a major city, not the isolated rural escape the farm silo framing might suggest. And because it's round, don't expect a normal bedroom layout. No square corners means the couch, the bed frame, and the kitchenette all had to be positioned to follow the curve of the wall rather than sit flush against a flat one. $91 for a real family silo with a genuine backstory, 20 minutes from Nashville. The next one costs $68 more and traveled 50 miles to get to its new home. The silo house at Laughing Llama Farm runs $159 a night, and the grain bin itself was moved from a 300-acre farm in Riesel, Texas, about 50 miles away, in the middle of what used to be cornfields. We could not confirm the year the original silo was built. No source documents that detail, only the relocation and renovation story, so we're not putting a date on screen that we can't back up. What is documented? The ceiling inside is built from reclaimed barnwood taken from two different sources. The original barn on the Riesel farm where the silo used to sit, and an old Sears and Roebuck house in Troy. That's a genuinely layered piece of salvage carpentry, even without a founding date attached to it. Every board up there has already had at least one previous life in a different building before it ended up here. At roughly 600 to 670 square feet, the round main floor holds a living area and kitchen with a spiral staircase leading up to a loft bedroom. It's rated 4.99 out of 5 across 265 reviews and has been featured on HGTV, Magnolia Network, and Business Insider. Airbnb itself has named it one of its most wish-listed farm stays. The farm around it is a working one. Llamas, sheep, goats, and cows guests can walk right up to, plus a fishing pond on the property's 10 private acres. Guests consistently mention two things in reviews: feeding the llamas by hand and sitting out on the porch rockers at night, watching the sunset over the pond. The kind of low-key, unhurried evening this whole format sells itself on. The honest catch: the loft bedroom is only reachable by a spiral staircase, a real accessibility limitation, not just a design detail. And despite the farm getaway framing, it's only 20 to 30 minutes from Waco, Temple, and Belton. 3 actual cities, not remote countryside. $159 for a silo with a documented salvage carpentry story, even without a founding date. The next one skips the relocation story entirely. It's never left the farm it started on. Silo Farmhouse starts at $189 a night, and it sits on 200 acres of working farmland in the heart of Missouri wine country. Here's what makes this one different from the last two. This grain bin actually stored grain on this exact farm for years before its conversion. It wasn't trucked in from somewhere else. The exact year it was built and what specific grain it held aren't documented in anything we could find. So, like the last chapter, we're naming the gap instead of guessing at a date. Now, an honest note about the price itself. One platform lists this property from $189, while 2 others independently show it closer to $321 to $347. That's a wider gap than normal seasonal pricing usually produces, and both figures come from real, separate booking platforms. So treat this less as one fixed rate and more as a real range that depends heavily on which dates and which site you're looking at. The catch beyond pricing: the exact original construction year and grain type are undocumented, the same gap as the previous chapter, and Ste. Genevieve's wine country draws its own steady stream of weekend tourists, so even a genuinely rural 200-acre farm sits inside a region that's used to visitors rather than a truly out-of-the-way stop. This is a working farm, but not an isolated one. From $189, or closer to $320, depending who you ask, for a silo that never left its own farm. The next one takes the round room problem and builds 2 entirely new rooms just to get around it. The silo cottage runs $284 a night, and it's billed as the first grain bin rental in Ohio's Hocking Hills region, Ohio's busiest corridor for cabin and glamping getaways. This is the property with the thinnest paper trail of the whole list. No source documents the original construction year, the source farm, or what grain it stored. Not even the operator's own reservation materials, which focus entirely on the current rental rather than the structure's agricultural life before it. We're stating that gap plainly rather than filling it with a guess. What we do know is the design solution, and it's the most literal answer to the round room problem on this list. 25-foot ceilings sit inside the main cylinder, with 2 separate symmetrical additions built onto the silo just to house the bathroom and bedroom. Instead of forcing plumbing and a bed frame to fight the curve, the Weaver family, who run it as the Hocking Hills Cottage Company, just built two small rectangular rooms onto the outside of the tube and left the cylinder itself open and dramatic. Inside, the amenities lean modern rather than rustic. An induction cooktop, a combined microwave oven air fryer, a gas fireplace, and a master spa hot tub on the patio. A very different vibe from the bare-bones farm-stay feel of the first three entries on this list. The honest catch: it sleeps a maximum of 2 guests and, as already covered, this is the one property on the list where even the current operator's materials don't reach back into the structure's own history. $284 for the most literal architectural answer yet to the circle problem. Build your way around it instead of inside it. The last one on this list didn't build around the circle. It hired one of the most famous architects alive to make the circle the entire point. The Silo Hotel starts at $1,729 a night, by far the most expensive stay on this list, and construction on the original grain elevator began in 1921, opening for business in 1924, standing 57 meters tall, the tallest building in sub-Saharan Africa at the time. This is the only property on the list with a fully documented original purpose. The elevator's first export shipment was over 6,000 tons of maize, loaded in November of 1924, and it kept handling maize and wheat for South African railways and harbors for nearly 80 years until its last shipment went out in 1995, and it was formally decommissioned in 2001. In 2013, the architecture firm Heatherwick Studio was brought in to convert the disused complex. The roughly 5-year renovation turned the lower floors into the Zeitz Mocha Museum and the top 6 floors into the Silo Hotel, opening in March of 2017 with 28 rooms, including a 1-bedroom penthouse. Every room carries its own curated collection of contemporary African art, and interior designer Liz Biden, the same person behind the rest of the Royal Portfolio's properties, handled the interiors while Thomas Heatherwick's studio handled the architecture. Here's the most expensive answer yet to the round room problem. Instead of hiding the curve, every room's windows are custom hand-blown pillowed glass bulging outward from the original silo tube. The shape of the building isn't disguised, it's the entire design statement. The honest catch, and it's a real one at this price. Guest reviews describe the entry-level rooms as small for the price, at around 41 square meters, and the design aesthetic is genuinely a love-it-or-hate-it one. Some guests call the rounded windows and rooftop pool spectacular. Others say the space doesn't match a price tag north of what a week at any other property on this list would cost. More fundamentally, this is the least authentic working farm stay on the entire list. It sits in the middle of Cape Town's busy V&A waterfront, surrounded by shops and restaurants, inside a museum complex with a rooftop pool, spa, and full breakfast built into the rate rather than a farm to walk. If what you actually want is a real converted farm silo, the cheapest one on this list gets you closer to that than the most expensive one does. 5 grain silos, 5 real bookable stays, and 5 completely different answers to the same architectural problem. None of these 5 owners solved the round room problem the same way. Tennessee kept it simple: a couch and a queen bed inside the curve. Texas ran a spiral staircase up through the middle. Missouri and Ohio both built their way around it, one with undocumented history, one with 2 entirely separate rooms bolted onto the outside. And Cape Town spent millions making the curve itself the reason you'd pay $1,700 a night. Price didn't buy authenticity on this list either. The cheapest stay had the most documented, most personal history, built by a son honoring his father's farm. The most expensive stay is the one furthest from an actual working farm, sitting in a city's busiest tourist harbor instead. Right in the middle of the price range, Missouri and Ohio landed in the middle of the authenticity question too, for 2 different reasons. One, because the paper trail on its own history is thin, the other because even the current owners couldn't fill in the gaps. If you're chasing the real version of this idea, a genuine converted grain silo, not just the aesthetic of one, the price tag isn't the signal to follow. To be clear, this is informational, not a booking service. We're not affiliated with any of these 5 properties, and every rate in this video is the lowest published figure as of our research, not a flat, guaranteed price. 2 of these 5 carry extra pricing uncertainty flagged directly in this video. Verify directly with each listing before you plan a trip around any of these numbers. One last thing worth sitting with. Every one of these 5 buildings was, at some point, headed for demolition or just quiet abandonment once it stopped being useful for grain. A round metal tube with no windows isn't an obvious candidate for a second life. 5 different owners looked at that same unpromising shape and saw a bedroom, a spiral staircase, a hot tub, a museum, or a $1,700 a night view, which is really a story about stubbornness and imagination more than it is about architecture. If you've stayed in one of these, or you know a silo conversion with an even better origin story, put it in the comments. And if this was useful, subscribing helps us keep finding places like this.